Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Deeply Rested podcast. We have gotten a lot of feedback from listeners over the past few months that you are loving our behind the scenes episodes, which is really cool and very exciting. So Nancy and I have been talking about ways to bring more of those episodes into the show in a way that really integrates with our values, with our desire for you to feel better and become deeply rested. And we also wanted to align with our values around transparency and openness that we talked about in our December episode inside our anti-capitalist journey. So we decided today to record ourselves, Nancy and I, talking about our vision for recording monthly episodes that help us do all of these tasks, that help us share more behind the scenes with you of what's happening here at Deeply Rested, but also helps all of us align with the seasons and slow down and bring more intentionality to the work that we're doing. And I personally am really working in my life right now on releasing my perfectionism and being less polished and less perfect and just allowing myself to really be more transparent in my creative process and in my business so that I can create with more ease and more inspiration. So today we're trying to do all of those things, and you're about to listen to that conversation of Nancy and I putting out on the table, what is the vision? What are we trying to do here? How can we make this work? And then how can we bring in what's happening in time right now in April at the beginning of spring to really create a through line in this conversation and in this podcast as a whole. So that's what you're in for. That's what's about to happen here. It's experimental. I've never done anything like this before, and I'm really excited to share it with you. I hope you enjoy it. We are going to put a link to a feedback survey in the show notes because we really want to hear your thoughts about what we're doing and what we're creating. I'm going to tell you a lot more about that in the actual conversation with Nancy, but yeah, as you're listening to this, please know that we want to co-create with you. We want this to be a collaborative process between us and the beautiful people who are actually listening to this podcast. I'm a little nervous to share it with you, but I think it will be fine. Maybe it will even be spectacular. I don't know. I won't know until you listen and tell me what you think. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this Deeply Rested April 2025 overview with me and Nancy Guidry. Welcome to Deeply Rested, the podcast that helps people doing good work in the world take incredibly good care of themselves. I'm your host, retired therapist and disillusioned business coach, Megan Megginson. I'm on a mission to help people like you unlearn the rules that keep you trapped in self-doubt so that you can recover from burnout and finally become deeply rested. If you enjoyed today's show, be sure to subscribe to this podcast and join our weekly newsletter at deeplyrested.com/newsletter. Now, it's time for the show. Some of my favorite conversations to listen to on podcasts, or I guess anywhere, it's like the behind the scenes of someone's creative process. Like authors that I love, books that I love, when they record or publish interviews talking about like how they came up with their idea. Or, okay, I finished. Are you watching Severance right now? Did you?
No, not watching Severance right now.
Okay. I'll try not to judge you too hard for being behind.
Thanks.
But after the season finale, which was amazing, no spoilers, I immediately was so curious to hear like the behind the scenes discussions from the writers and the director being like, wait, why did you make that choice? And like, how did you create? Anyways, I just love that. I really love hearing people's creative process. So that's like a personal thing for me. And then combined with, I think the feedback we're getting about the podcast from our lovely listeners is that they love the behind the scenes episodes where we're talking about our business or we're talking about our process. And I want to follow that thread because that's interesting to me. And it's exciting to me that people are interested in that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a good idea. I love transparency. It creates interesting conversations. it's like exposing the truth of everything. And I feel that there's something really intriguing about just the truth of what a thing is on display. I'm into this idea of giving little behind the scenes glimpses.
Yeah, in the spirit of truth and transparency. You just said that. That's why we're doing this. Because there is power in being more honest. We talked about this in the episode we published in December. Inside our anti-capitalist business journey or whatever. But in that episode, which if you haven't listened to that, you should go listen to that. It felt so good to be honest.
Yeah.
And it made me really realize how few places there are to be that honest. Even though I know we both value transparency and honesty, but where does one go to share in that way? Obviously, I think this is like the perfect platform for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so this feels important. We're naming right now. Why are we doing this? Let's talk about that. And what are we doing? What are we doing? So we have this idea to record monthly episodes that get published the first week of the month, and that the episode is like an overview of the month ahead. So we're recording today for the episode that will be released the first week of April. The overarching structure or intention for this vision is that every month there's an episode where listeners can really tune into their own process, slowing down time. We talk a lot about this in our work with clients, right? How do we slow down time? Like, we slow down time by actually syncing with nature and with what's happening in the world right now. It's like pausing at the beginning of the month to take a deep breath and to say, okay, what's happening in nature right now? What's happening in my life right now? What's happening in my business right now? How do I want to show up over the next 4 weeks? What do I want to bring forward over the next 4 weeks? And it's when we slow down to create space for that intentionality that we actually feel like we step off the hamster wheel of our life and we get more in touch with what feels real and what feels true. So we are curious about using a monthly episode as kind of an experiment on the podcast to see if listeners know that there's going to be an episode at the beginning of every month that they can listen to really drop in, slow themselves down, think more holistically about their own life and business, and also hear how we are doing that in real time, like allowing ourselves to be models for people who are listening. Just to be clear, we don't have any of this figured out. Like, we are doing it in real time. So letting people see and witness what we're doing in real time, but also weaving into these monthly episodes a lot of questions and prompts for the listeners to do this. This is where I want feedback from you. I'm not interested in just talking about my process because I'm so interesting. And like, people are definitely going to want to just hear me talk about my process all the time. It feels to me like it's a slippery slope into ego territory. That's my concern about doing this, is I don't want to be like a jack off podcast, you know, where I'm just like, listen to me and blah, blah. No, I feel like an open book. I'm willing to share anything, but I want there to be a clear connection for the listener about how they can find their way in their own business. If they're listening to you and I talk about our process, I don't want them to feel like they have to replicate what we're doing. I want it to be really clear. How do I take inspiration from this and apply it to my business in a really specific, personalized way? So I'm curious, like, what's standing out to you and what are your ideas?
Yeah, I hear everything that you're saying. And the way that I have been kind of thinking about this, because same, like, it feels weird to be like, hey, let's just do this behind the scenes episode of what we're doing. You know, like, I don't know. The first part of me wants to say, well, who cares about that?
Yeah.
And then as I think more about it, there's something that you have said before in the past about operating in an anti-capitalist way within a capitalist system. And I think the metaphor that you used was, we're all on a capitalist playground, but we don't have to engage in their games. We can come over to our own little corner of the playground and start a new game, you know? And I think the way that my thinking about these particular episodes has evolved is like, this is how we're going to invite people to play with us. come play on our side of the playground and you get to be here with us while we're still figuring out what the rules are, like, how does this game work? And so that kind of feels to me like what we're doing here. Come with us on this path.
I love that.
We don't know where it's going to go.
Mm-hmm.
We are figuring it out in real time, but come with us. Let's do this together.
Yeah.
And hopefully, like it will inspire people or at least start conversations with people about how can we all play a new game on this playground.
I love the idea that we're co-creating the game together. That's so much more interesting to me than you and I are having these conversations and everyone else is just watching. They're like, oh, Megan and Nancy are going to figure out how to be anti-capitalists on the capitalist playground. And we're just waiting for them to figure it out so that we can then apply that to our lives and businesses. And I think you and I are both very much, no, that's actually part of the system. If you're following what someone else is doing, like you're still in your own conditioning, capitalism, patriarchy, whatever. Like the medicine, the magic is feeling strong enough in yourself that you can create your own rules. But you don't have to create your own rules in isolation. But we want to create a playground space where we can co-create together. What does this look like? We want you listeners to be a part of this process. We want you to feel like you're not just listening to this journey, but you're on this journey.
Yeah.
Does that feel right?
Yeah, that feels right.
As I'm listening to you, something that's clarifying in my mind is, I'm like, what is my hesitancy about doing this? If I can just get all the way down to the deepest, or maybe not the deepest, but a deeper layer of truth about what's my resistance to this. I'm thinking about social media and why I can't tolerate social media. And even to an extent, like personal brands. This is started as a personal brand. I don't know. I think it's becoming something different. But when I go on social media, I feel like what I'm scrolling through when like my business algorithm kicks in are all of these people who are saying, look at my life and my business. Make yours match mine. That's what they're selling. They're selling their life as the success story, or they're selling their business as the success story. And then we're all just caught in these relationships where we feel like my next step forward is mimicking something that you're doing, or the life that I'm trying to create for myself is based on what I saw someone more, quote, more successful than me doing and living in their life. And then we're all just like replicating what other people are showing us on the surface. It makes me feel sick in my body. It makes me feel sick because I see all of us collectively just handing our agency over to people who look better than we do, or who we think look better than we do.
Right.
And I don't want to play that game. I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to be someone that people listen to the podcast or read the emails or whatever and go, okay, how can I do exactly what Megan did? How can I do exactly what Megan and Nancy are doing? It's like, no, that's literally not the point. The point is, how can we create a space where we can all listen to ourselves and then do what we are meant to do individually and trust that actually we're all supposed to do something so drastically different. That's what makes the world an interesting and well-balanced ecosystem. Like we're all participating and contributing in different ways. So that feels really important to me as we're figuring out what are these monthly episodes going to look like. Is I really don't want to create a format that feeds into that conditioning that you're supposed to listen or watch and then mimic or replicate what we're doing.
Right.
Like, I don't want to participate in that ever.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I totally hear you. And I feel like it's always a little bit of a red flag to me when I come across somebody who's like, I have all the answers. Here's your prescription. Here's, do X, Y, Z, and you'll be whatever, you'll achieve whatever it is. Because I don't think that any one of us has all of the answers. I mean, obviously people are experts in their fields, but I'm just always wary when people are like, here is the way. And I don't want to do that either. And I don't want to participate in that either. And I think that one of the things that I value in our work is, especially doing this kind of episode, is like, here we are figuring it out. Here is getting back to the core of the truth. We are figuring this out, and we don't have all the answers because we're still on this journey. We're still walking this path, and we won't ever have all the answers, you know?
It's an illusion that there is a reality in which all questions are answered.
Right.
Thank you for reflecting that back much more succinctly than I did. Adding one thing onto that, it's like the red flag when people are like, I know the way, or I have all the answers. And that the quote proof that they have all the answers is them showing you a produced version of their life. It's so dangerous, right? On Instagram, they're like doing an Instagram story, like walking down the street. And they're like, just getting my coffee and blah, 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 and living my best life. And then you see these like curated pictures of like their house and these curated pictures of being on the beach with their friends. And they're painting this picture that they have this life that we should aspire to have. And they have the roadmap to have that life. And I'm like, listen, like I'm totally down to hear your area of expertise. The skills that you've honed, the methods that you're creating, the ideas that you are cultivating. I want to know those. I'm really interested in learning about that. But don't tell me that I should be interested because you are living an ideal life. Yeah. That's a red flag to me because you're not living an ideal life. I think like I was a couples therapist long enough with, quote, highly successful people to know the more you're trying to sell me on your ideal life, the more like fucked up things are behind the scenes. Yeah. Like I don't buy it and I don't want to participate in that. So it feels good to say that out loud. I don't think I had gotten all the way through this in my own mind yet. Let me say this for accountability. In these monthly episodes, I want to be really mindful, you and I, that we're not defaulting consciously or unconsciously to telling like a shiny version of the truth. That doesn't mean we have to air all of our dirty laundry. Like we can have boundaries in what we're sharing. We can choose what we share and what we keep private. But if we find ourselves every month talking about how awesome things are and that's it, I want someone to call us out on that and to be like, yeah, but where's the challenge? Where's the struggle? Like what kind of like roadblocks have you encountered as you are creating X, Y, and Z? That's part of that truth and transparency that you mentioned earlier. How can we do this in a way that feels really truthful and really transparent, but also inspiring? I'm not interested in listening to a podcast where we're just like bitching about our lives. Right. Complaining.
Like, let me complain about the last few weeks for everyone.
Yeah. No, that's not interesting. That's not helpful. How do we want listeners to feel after they listen to these monthly episodes? Let's start there.
I think the first thing that comes to mind is just that they're not alone. You know, that there are people out here trying to do this good work. And that they're not alone. And I guess a lot of people that come into our orbit are in a place where they're either like trying to just steady their business out and make it feel less overwhelming, feel less stress in their lives, or they're trying to do something new and bring a new program or just something they're trying to like level up in their business. And I think a lot of people get messages that like they're doing it wrong. And so I think the other thing that I would like for people to take away from these conversations is that you're not doing it wrong. You know, it doesn't have to be this like linear progression straight up on a graph that you're like, the time in equals exactly that much success. That's just not realistic. And so I think for us to be able to show the messiness that happens behind the scenes sometimes we're like nailing it and everything's going really smoothly. And sometimes things will fall apart for a week or whatever. And I just think coming back to that, like bearing the truth of it will help people to realize that like we're figuring it out. We're not doing it wrong if we're not following a straight linear trajectory. We're just taking a different meandering path, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And
I love that. Validated, connected, like a sense of belonging, permission to do things differently. Permission. That's what I want. Like, I want people to listen to our monthly episodes and to feel fully liberated to truly listen to themselves and to trust themselves. And I want them to be inspired. I want us to frame these episodes in such a way that when you get to the end of it, you feel seen and understood and also inspired to move forward. Because it's easy to listen to philosophical podcasts. I mean, that's like, it's easiest for me just to like wax poetic about an idea. But I think it's like, I want to get better at taking the ideas and turning them into action that doesn't feel like homework. And I know you and I share this value about the Deeply Rested podcast overall, that we don't want our episodes to give people homework. But if someone listens to a whole hour-long conversation, like, first of all, you know that there's something really resonating about that topic. So we want listeners to get to the end of those episodes, if they're really into it, and feel a little bit clearer about what they can do next or how they can weave more of that idea into their business. But we don't want it to feel like all of those like really helpful, actionable business podcasts that actually just stress me out, because it's like, here's 5 steps that you need to do next. And I'm like, wait a minute, do I need to do that next? Like, I don't even, it's just like, I feel like assaulted by like helpful tips. I don't want that. So I want us to find this balance. We're helping people feel seen and understood. We're giving people permission to really listen to themselves, to do things in a different way. And we're also giving just enough structure, maybe through prompts, things to think about, steps to take, ways to plan your life and business for the coming month that helps you move forward in a more intentional way without making you feel like you are overwhelmed with items you need to put on your to-do list. How does that land for you?
Yeah, I love that, especially the part about not feeling like you're overwhelmed with things to do after listening. That's not the goal.
No. Thumbs down. Do not recommend.
Yeah.
We don't need more things to do across the board. Right. Nobody listening to our podcast or maybe on the planet needs another thing to do. Yeah. But it is a fine balance, because of course we have to do things to move our lives in the direction that we really want them to go. So we're not saying you just throw your hands up and, eat grapes and wait for your life to magically become the way you want it to be. Maybe it just comes back to intention. I want people to listen to these episodes and to feel clearer at the end about what their intention is for their life and their business for that month in a way that really aligns with the season. What is your intention? What do you want to change or do different or experiment with that really is coming from your spirit and not from an idea someone else told you should have? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we've outlined here, like, why are we doing this? What are we concerned about? What do we not want to do? How do we want people to feel? I'm getting a little bit clearer, I think, about where we're starting with these episodes. How about you?
Yeah. Yeah, same.
Let's talk about, maybe when we get to the end of this, it will feel right to share the creative process behind why are we doing these episodes? How are we creating them? I also want to say that I want to get better on this podcast of getting feedback from listeners. That's something that I'm learning from like some podcast people I'm learning from right now, is ask your listeners for feedback. It seems so obvious, but I hadn't even thought about it. I would love for us to create like a really simple listener feedback survey that we can put in the show notes, and then get better at every episode asking listeners, like, did you love this episode? Did you hate this episode? Are there conversations you really want to hear Nancy and I have? Let us know. We want to co-create this with you. We're not doing this podcast because it makes us feel like fancy. We're doing this because we want to co-create. We want to have a collective conversation about how we can do small business through an anti-capitalist lens. So I think that's one thing I want to add into the mix is, okay, great, listeners just heard you and I talk about what we're thinking and why we're doing this. Now, listeners, can you go to this feedback survey and tell us what you think about everything we just said and let us know? Does this resonate? Does this not resonate? What would you like to experience in these monthly episodes that truly are for you in the moment, timely? Okay. Should we talk about my thoughts for the structure of the episodes?
Yeah.
I have some thoughts. Have you thought about potential structure?
Yeah, a little bit, but let's hear what you got.
I'm very non-attached to these ideas, by the way. So feel free to push back, but it's just kind of the first pass of the experiment that comes through is starting the episode talking about the moment in time, right? Because we really want these episodes to feel timely, connected to the season, connected to what's happening in the world, because that feels really important right now. So we start by talking about this moment in time and what's happening and what we can learn and how we're responding, and then segue into what we are doing this month in our business to model, not because we want listeners to copy what we're doing, but as a way to model. Here is how we are applying what is happening in nature to the work we are doing this month, and then ending with some prompts for the listener. Here are some questions you can ask yourself as you step into April. Here are some creative experiments we want to offer to you if they feel right. And that's it. That's all I got.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds great. That is, well aligned with my thoughts as well. Yeah, I was thinking about just a reflection of where we are in time, what's happening in the natural world, maybe a reflection on the month we just had, going into the month that we're about to go into. What are our intentions for that? That all sounds great.
Okay, well, why don't we just dive in and do a truncated version of that?
All right.
For this episode. Total experiment. And then listener, we're going to ask you to give us feedback after you listen to this. Do you like this? Do you want us to keep doing these monthly episodes? We want to co-create this with you, and we want to create something for you that like really feels helpful through the podcasting medium. Because you and I, we do this with our coaching clients, with our mastermind, the council, with our one-on-one clients. Like we do this work. We know that this work is effective in the way that we envision it to be effective. But now we're like, how do we translate this to the podcast medium? That's the big question. It's like, this is so different. Where the client isn't there giving us feedback, working with us in the moment. Yeah. So we're very open to hearing feedback, good, bad, and ugly. We want this to be something that's really special. Okay. Do you think we should draw cards like live doing these recordings? That's one thing I'm really curious about. Like, how can we weave into these podcast episodes the spiritual, ritual, kind of witchy elements that we bring into our group work? How do we translate that to the podcast medium? I don't know. Let's play. Let's see. Let's see what happens. Okay, so we're going to do a shortened version for April just to feel it out. We're going to start by talking about the month, what is happening in nature, lessons that we can distill from that for our lives and our businesses. Then we'll share a little bit about what we're doing, how we are weaving that wisdom into this business, into Deeply Rested. And then we'll think about some prompts and some invitations we can offer listeners to really integrate the wisdom of the moment into their life and business.
Sounds great.
So here we are. We're in April. Winter is done. Spring has arrived in her full chaotic splendor. We, last week, did our spring planning workshop, which was awesome for me. How was it for you?
It was great. Yeah, I thought the experience was lovely.
I loved the conversation in the workshop about what we can notice in the transition from winter to spring, nature, and how we can apply those lessons to our lives and businesses. So let's start there and just share some of the things that really stood out to both of us. What do you see, Nancy, when you step outside right now at this threshold between winter and spring?
Yeah. Well, the cherry blossoms have just really burst forth this week. I went on a walk this morning and I was like, oh, here they are. And so, everything is just in bloom. Tulips are about to open up. You know, there's all of a sudden like a bunch of green in the patches of my garden that were just brown with dirt and soil before, and things are starting to pop up and flowers are going. There's more bugs in the air and it's just like some life is coming back to everything.
Yes, like nature is waking up.
Yeah, visibly.
Right. Explain why you just said that.
Yeah, because there's like always life happening. And in the wintertime, I think about it as everything's just hibernating. But there's still a lot happening underneath the surface of the soil. Things, animals, they're still alive, but they're kind of holed up in their dens or whatever it is. And now in springtime is when we perceive the life that's coming forth. Whereas like before it pops out of the ground, it's still doing something. You just can't see it yet.
Yeah. That's winter,
Mm-hmm.
right? This is why we take our sabbatical in the winter. This is why we like dial back our client work in the winter, because we're like, hey, we all need to chill. We need to rest. We need to hibernate. We need to let everything that we've cultivated over the past year work its magic in our subconscious underground. And we need to recharge our batteries because, like you're saying, stepping into this spring portal, the energy gets ramped way up. All that new growth, it's like you can feel it energetically. Walking down the street, you can feel people are waking up, like creative juices start flowing again. We talked about this at the workshop. It's a little bit harder to notice that change of energy if you weren't wintering. So before I started really tuning my energy to the cycles of nature, I would bulldoze through winter the same way I would summer. So when the transition to spring happened, I just felt tired because I had just pushed for months and months. And then people would talk about this new spring energy and I'd be like, fuck you guys. Like, I'm so tired right now. I don't get it. So if that's you listening to this right now, where you're like, I'm so tired, like I don't feel that spring energy, that's okay. Just notice that you didn't rest in the winter. You didn't slow down in the winter in the way that could prepare you to harness the collective energy of spring. And when you're listening to our monthly episode this time next year, hopefully you'll be feeling really different. You'll have a really different experience of this moment in time. Okay, just wanted to add that in as a disclaimer. I love what you're saying. You're noticing popping off flowers, trees, like the birds are singing. It's woof, spring is here. We've also talked a lot about how spring is really messy. It's like pouring rain and then like beautiful sunshine and everything's muddy, right? Because those plants, they're starting to come back, but they're not totally here yet. So there's a messiness to spring that I think we are embodying by starting this process right now of doing these episodes. Like this episode is the embodiment of the messiness of spring. Like we are planting some seeds in our garden. We can see what we want the garden to look like with these episodes in the future, but it starts here. It's messy. It's experimental. We don't know what's going to work and what's not going to work. We're doing the work now. Like we are planting the seeds now. We are experimenting now. To me, that is really what it means to harness the energy of spring. That I am like being bold and I am planting lots of different seeds and I'm loosening my grip on what the outcome is going to be of any one thing that I plant. Because if you've ever gardened, or even if you have houseplants, you know the one thing that you can guarantee is you have no idea what's going to happen. Like you don't know.
That's true.
You don't know what's going to like germinate and what's going to sprout and what's going to thrive. And maybe over time you get better at anticipating it the more time you spend in your garden, but still there's an element of life that just isn't in your control. And I think spring teaches me a lot about that, about releasing my need to be perfect and to have it all figured out. Spring teaches me to be bold, to be experimental, to try a lot of things, and then to allow myself to be really surprised by ends up truly thriving.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about spring?
No, I think that covers it. I think the surprising, like allowing yourself to be surprised is a huge part of it. Just going back to thinking about spring through the lens of a gardener's, you know, I've had a garden for, 15 years or so. And over that time, I've taught myself, I've learned a lot, I've figured out a lot of things. And even though I have so many years of that experience every year, I still don't know what's going to thrive and what's not. Like I have educated guesses, but just because I've done this before many times doesn't mean that the outcome is always going to be the same. So I love that, allowing yourself to be surprised.
And there are so many variables, right? Thinking about the metaphor of the garden, it's not just the seeds that you plant. And it's like the dirt that you use. It's the amount of water that we got in the winter. It's how sunny is it? What's the temperature? Like there are so many elements. And I think that is really true for our businesses too, that we try to over control and we think that like we're in control of every single variable. Okay, if I just do this, if I just do that, if I just follow this plan. But it's like, hold on, dude, take a breath. Zoom out. There are so many variables here that are out of your control. What's happening in the world? What's happening in the economy? How's your health? Does your family need you right now? Do your clients, are they interested in the ideas that you're interested in right now? There are so many variables that are going to determine the success of the seeds that you sow. So the more creative you can get, the more experimental you can get, the more ideas you can throw out there and test, the more likely you are going to be to find one thing that really thrives and really aligns. So I love that energy in spring. And when I'm working with business owners, I love to use this season to say, like, how many new ideas do you have? Let's put them all on the board. They are all possible. Every single thing that you are dreaming of is possible right now. How can we harness the energy of this season to plant seeds in a controlled way so that maybe you land on something that is magical?
Yeah.
Okay. It's so exciting. Anything else you want to say about spring?
No, I think we've covered it.
Yeah, me too. And April showers bring May flowers, right? And we're in April. And what does that mean to me? That means like it's going to be super rainy this month. Interpret that however you will. That yes, the spring energy is here, but it's still really rainy. And it's still like we're in the transition out of the darkness of winter. So don't jump too far ahead. Like there's a magic to the month of April that I want us all to slow down and experience. The start and the stop, the sun and the rain. There's a lot of polarity here in April that I think invites us to really slow down and sync with what is happening outside. We're not in full steam ahead mode yet. We are very much in prep and be creative and emerge from our caves, emerge from hibernation. So I want to hold that in mind too, that April still is rainy and dark a lot of the time. Let's talk about what you and I are focusing on this month.
Yeah.
What are we focusing on this month, Nancy?
Well, I think going back to just thinking about April overall, it's my birth month.
Yay!
So I feel like April, I just have always loved the month of April. It's like spring starts popping off. And I feel like there's like an energy that comes in that's like a creative energy, like you were saying. There's like ideas forming, inspiration, strikes. And I think that for me, April has always been a month of like, how can I like ramp up my energy? And not in a way that's like, how can I do more or how can I be super productive? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just feeling that surge within my body, within myself, and channeling that into something. So maybe that's channeling it into ideas. Me being a generator, I feel like I do this in my personal life, and it feels appropriate in this season of the business to really take that energy and channel it into crystallizing visions. And like taking all of the big ideas and saying, okay, these are the ones that we're really going to feed and nurture in this season of spring so that hopefully they can bloom and grow into beautiful fruits in the summertime. And so that's kind of what April to me really is. I think of it as just like taking all of these ideas and really clarifying the vision and putting some practical steps into place to be able to realize, to like say, okay, so like what's our plan?
Yeah.
Like seeing the vision, getting more clear on the plan, and starting to put things into motion.
Love that so much.
Yeah.
April is about crystallizing the vision and clarifying the plan. That is such a helpful reminder for me because I notice in myself, definitely am feeling the surge of creative energy this month. Just that sense of, whoa, like I'm having so many ideas, and I'm like writing so many things down and I am getting clear about so many things. I'm like, oh my gosh, now I know what the messaging on the website homepage needs to say. And now I know that I want to do these monthly episodes for the podcast. I'm getting like all of these. Now I know how I want to rework my welcome sequence. Like it's all coming through really fast. And it's easy, dangerous even for me that sometimes when that energy starts coming through, I interpret that as I need to act right now. I need to take action on all of this right now, which is the best way to burn out. before we even get to summer is to jump on the bandwagon and just soar. If you have that kind of energy, God bless you. That's awesome. I do not. So I have to really check myself at this time of year. I talk a lot with my clients about having a good ideas parking lot. That's what I call it. So like creating a Google Doc that is a place you can park all of your brilliant ideas. So you have a place, you can pull up on your phone super fast when an idea comes through and you can write it down, every single thing you're thinking about that idea. And then you just leave it in the parking lot because it's not time yet to bring all of these things to life. If we jump into action before we've clarified the vision, before we've crystallized the plan, we're probably going to burn ourselves out and we're going to be disappointed with our results. So April for us is going to be about crystallizing the vision, clarifying the plan. That's what we're going to be doing. I will throw in the mix that I know a couple of projects that we've talked about feel really important in this moment is this podcast. Like we really are wanting to work this season, this spring, on figuring out how to optimize this podcast, how to make it better, how to get more listeners, how to create a bridge so that people who listen and love this podcast have a way to work with us directly. And we've hired somebody to work with us to help us figure this out. We're really excited about that. I'm really excited about that because it's a little overwhelming, this whole podcasting world. It's a lot. Maybe we could talk about that next month even, like the behind the scenes of creating a podcast. So focusing on the podcast, crystallizing a vision around the podcast. We also know that we want to start a second mastermind group. So we run a mastermind called The Council, and we've never talked about it publicly because the group that we run now is just full of alumni, people who have worked with us before, who wanted to be in community with us again. And it's really beautiful. And we spent all of last year honing it in. That would be another interesting conversation, like behind the scenes, to talk about the way that we let the group reveal itself to us over the seasons. What does this group want to be? How does it want to exist? And we were really following the wisdom that was showing up in the moment. But now we know, right? Now we've crystallized. We know the purpose of this group. We know how it forms. We're ready to do a second one. So we need this month to really crystallize the vision and the plan for rolling that out. Writing the sales page, deciding when we're going to open applications, etc. Like we need to really make a plan because this is one of those moments where I'm like, we probably should have had this plan like 6 months ago. But here we are, like it's showing up for us now. And then there's something I want everyone to remember is maintenance. Because you already have a bunch of things in your business that you're already doing, that you're going to continue doing, right? No matter what month it is or what season it is. So I always like to take a pause every month, Nancy and I, just to be like, okay, what's going on right now? What groups are we running? How many private clients are we working with? What kind of promotions are we doing? And just make sure that we're not forgetting about any of the work that we've already committed to doing. Because sometimes like the new ideas, the bright and shiny ideas can come in and they're so cool and they're so new that you just want to give all of your energy to them. And you forget that, yes, and you already have all of these other things on your plate. Don't forget about them. So I think in the crystallizing the vision and clarifying the plan, it's really important to zoom out and make sure you're really synthesizing everything you're already doing, all the seeds you want to plant, all the new things you might want to create, and see how do these fit together? How does all of this fit together? So that as I step in to May, to June, to the transition to summer, I'm really clear and intentional about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I really loved about the spring planning workshop that we just did is like taking everything that you're doing, not just in your business, but also in your life, because there are things that you're constantly doing in your life, like the maintenance things in your life that don't stop either. And just getting all of that in one place where you can really see laid bare, what do I have going on? And then, we talked a lot about like having all of these new ideas, and that's great, and rolling with that creative energy. And I think it's also important to like not overwhelm your system with too many things.
Yeah.
So if you are in an idea generating place right now and you're finding that you're having all of these ideas, I know you mentioned using like the good ideas parking lot, and then thinking over the next month or so, like what are the ideas that are ready to come forward right now
Yeah.
that I have the space to start actually working on right now? And making sure that you're not overwhelming yourself, not giving yourself too much to do at once, because that's just, again, like leading down a path towards burnout. So yeah, just like energetic management. How are you managing your energy with all of the ideas that you may or may not be having, with all of the things that you're already doing? So yeah.
Yes. Amen to all of that. In our planning process, we always start with life first, which we haven't talked much about today, but we'll just throw it in because it's so important. We want you to start with your life. What's going on in your life? What's taking energy from you right now? What do you love? What do you want to prioritize? And start there so that when you then dive into your business, you are really clear about how much energy you have, how much bandwidth you have. I think for so many of us, they often don't match up, which sucks, but it's just true. Like when I might be like an ideas factory in my business and I feel like so juiced up and ready to go and create a bunch of new things. But it happens to be a season of my life when my health is struggling or my marriage is really in a challenging place or my parents are dying. And we have to be honest with ourselves about, okay, I want to make sure that I'm prioritizing my life and that I'm creating business intentions that really match up with the energy that I have and the bandwidth that I have. That's what we want for you listening to this. Like, we want you to live a life that you feel so connected to and that you are so present for, and that your business is this thing that supports your life and adapts to your life. So take some time this month to really zoom out. And in the crystallizing of the plan, don't forget to think about your life. What's happening in your life? What's important to you this month in your life? And now thinking about your business and thinking about when you're crystallizing the plan for your business, I would really think about the rest of the year. When you're thinking about the vision that you have for your business, don't stop at the end of spring. Let's use the mastermind as an example, the council. We want to start a new council, right? Well, that council isn't going to start until summer at the earliest. And I think what we're playing with right now is we'd love to do a 6-month council that starts at summer and goes through winter. So we have to plan it now. But we're holding the vision for the rest of the year. So make sure you're thinking about what these visions and ideas that you have. It's like, when do you need to plant the seeds for the idea? When will the idea be growing? When will you be harvesting the fruits of your labor? Like, really kind of forecast all the way out so that you can reverse engineer and ask yourself, now I have the vision for what I'm creating. Can I create a plan that feels in alignment with my life, that feels synced up with this moment, with this particular month, this season? And that is how we become deeply rested, by just slowing everything down and bringing much deeper intention to every single thing that we do in our lives and in our businesses.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Maybe.
Yeah.
I feel like I have no idea
absolutely.
if I'm making sense right now.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's always a great reminder to come back to intentionality.
Yeah.
Right? Like moving with intention and not just throwing spaghetti at the wall.
Yes. I love that. And again, I love that this episode for us is like the embodiment of the beginning of spring.
Yeah.
Like, we're being super messy and not being perfectionists, and we're just throwing it out there, and we're going to see like what lands. And if you've listened all the way through to the end of this episode, thank you. Thrilled to have you here. And we would really like to hear from you. So we're going to put a link in the show notes for your feedback. And we want to know, are you excited about this idea of Nancy and I doing these monthly episodes? What do you want to get from them? Did we say something that made you really excited? Do you have an idea that you want to throw into the mix? Truly, we want to co-create this with the people who are listening to these conversations. And we're going to just let it be a little bit different every month until we find our rhythm. And we're going to be really open and transparent and truthful about the process of creating something new like this. We don't want you just to see the polished final product. We want you to really see how messy and vulnerable and experimental it is to figure it out together, because that's what we're doing. And this does feel really vulnerable for me. I don't know if it feels like we had no plan coming into today. We're like, let's just talk about it. And it's like, I don't know. Is this cool? Is this helpful? Is this stupid? I don't know. Just trusting that it's the beginning of something that we're creating. So it's okay if it's a little bit messy. How are you feeling?
Yeah. Quite the same. Like, are we going to turn the recording off and be like, oh God, what have we just done? But I think I'm trusting that, like you were saying, it'll be fine no matter what.
It'll be fine no matter what. This is the experiment for me because I absolutely struggle with perfectionism big time. And I want things to be like highly produced and polished. I'm a pretty polished person overall. And I like a beautiful thing. And I'm really working on letting that go in my life, personally, professionally. I don't want to feel so handcuffed by the need for things to look perfect. And so this is like an exercise for me personally, being like, well, what happens if you just let people watch you figure it out? I don't know. I'll have to talk to my therapist about it after this episode's release.
Yeah.
I'm going to be like, can you listen to this before my therapy session? Because we're going to need to talk about it. Okay, great. I think we've said enough for today.
Yeah. I think so.
Okay. So I have my card deck here, and
great.
We'll put the link to this deck in the chat. It's one of my favorite decks. It's called Poesis. And each card has like an illustration, one word, and then there's a website where you can go and each card has a poem attached to it. So I'm going to pull a card here and I'm going to ask, just what's our guiding force for April? A little bit. Can we get some guidance here for April? Something that we need to be mindful of or pay attention to collectively. Does that feel like a good question?
Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds great.
All right. Let's get some guidance here for April. All right. Oh, okay. All right. You'll have to go to YouTube if you want to see the card. But here it is. So the word is open. Open. And Nancy, describe the illustration and I'll pull up the poem.
Yeah. It's a person's head, and kind of in the third eye area, there's just like an open door with us. It looks like a star or something through the open door. And it looks like, are there leaves and plants growing out of there?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's like plants, there's butterflies. There's also like stars behind the person's head. Like they're in the cosmos. Wow. Open. April, we're going to be open. Should I read the poem or not? What do you think?
I think we should read the poem.
Okay, so let me just give full credit real quick. So this deck is created by Andrea Wan, W-A-N, and the poetry of this deck is written by Megan King. So thanks to them, because this is our favorite deck. And you can find this deck at Poesis, Poesis-oracle.com. Okay, here we go. Open. No longer do I perceive my being as though it were a project in constant need of self-improvement strategies. I surrender to all that I am, as I am, with my heart shining forward and my forehead streaming consciousness. These heart lines, heated in my hands, these feet rooted in your depths. I am as steady as a mountain. I am as open as the sky. Having already been shook by you, nothing can ever quake me. Having already been shattered by you, nothing can ever break me. I dwell in your grace and revel in the sunlight that's beaming on my face. I think we should leave it right there.
Yeah.
May we be open this month. May we bring the intention of letting our creative juices flow freely, but we're going to channel those creative juices into a crystallized vision. What do we want to do? What do we want to create? And when we feel clearer about the vision, we're going to drop into clarifying a plan. Doesn't have to be robust. It might just even be 5 things you need to do to get from here to there. But we want to have just enough structure that we know which direction to move. Because when we know which direction to move, we can actually do it with a lot more ease.
And intention.
And intention. We'll put the feedback survey in the show notes. We would love to hear from you. And we'll check in with you again the first week of May.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Deeply Rested. If you enjoyed this conversation, I would love to invite you to join the Deeply Rested weekly newsletter. You can sign up at deeplyrested.com/newsletter. I hope to meet you in my inbox very soon.